If it's not about sports, I find it very hard to concentrate.
What is up, guys? It's Braden here from Dragon King Sports, and today I'm coming at you with the third installment of my Dead Team series. The subject of today's video is the Houston Oilers, who moved to Nashville, Tennessee in 1997 and eventually became the Titans, starting in 1999. The city of Houston had longed for a professional football team for a long time before the Oilers arrived on the scene, and as early as the 1950s, efforts were made to get one. You see, football in Texas reigned supreme, with many folks down there treating it like a religion. A new startup league, the American Football League, began in 1960, and Kenneth "Bud" Adams, a Houston-based oil tycoon, was granted a franchise in Houston to be named the Oilers. The Oilers finished their inaugural season with a 10-4 record and Eastern Division Championship, and faced the Los Angeles Chargers in the first ever AFL Championship, a game they would win 24-16 to claim the league's first title. The following year, they would repeat as champions with a 10-3-1 record, another Eastern Division crown, and another victory over the Chargers, who had since moved to San Diego. The Oilers were the AFL's first back-to-back champions. In 1962, the Oilers went 11-3 and won the Eastern Division yet again, and looked poised to claim a three-peat, but lost to the Dallas Texans in double overtime, 20-17, in a game that at the time was the longest professional football game ever played. The Oilers had originally played in the 36,000-seat Jepson Stadium, but in 1964 moved to Rice Stadium, where the Rice Owls college football team played. Rice Stadium was a much larger venue with 70,000 seats. Soon, the Astrodome was built, and the Oilers moved into it in 1968, and that's where they would stay for the remainder of their time in Houston. The NFL-AFL merger happened in 1970, and the following years were rough for the Oilers, as they were placed in the AFC Central, becoming a mainstay in the cellar of that division in the early 70s. They went 3-10-1 in 1970, and 4-9-1 in 1971. Then they had horrible back-to-back seasons of 1-13 in 1972 and 1973. But a 7-7 record in 1974 brought hope for the Oilers, who were guided by first-year head coach and future Hall of Famer Sid Gilman. The next year in 1975 brought the arrival of coach Bum Phillips, who was known for his signature cowboy hat and flashy fur coats. And if you know anything about football, you'll know about Phillips, as he is known for his coaching tenures with the Oilers and the New Orleans Saints. He is also a member of the Texas Sports Hall of Fame, having been defensive coordinator at SMU and head coach at UTEP prior to becoming head coach of the Oilers. Phillips guided them to a 10-4 record in 1975, but the team failed to make the playoffs. The following season in 1976, injuries piled up and the team sputtered, finishing 5-9. In 1977, they finished 8-6 and missed the playoffs. However, the following spring in the 1978 NFL Draft, the team struck gold by drafting Texas star running back Earl Campbell with the first overall pick that they had obtained by trading their tight end Jimmy Giles to the Tampa Bay Buccaneers. Campbell would be named Rookie of the Year following the 78-79 season, as the Oilers went 10-6 and made the playoffs for the first time in the decade, facing the Miami Dolphins in the wildcard round. They emerged victorious over the Dolphins, defeating them 17-9. The following week, they beat the New England Patriots in the divisional round, setting up a matchup in the AFC Championship with the heavily favored Pittsburgh Steelers, who had finished the regular season 14-2 and routed the Denver Broncos in the divisional round by a score of 33-10. The Steelers would have no problem in doing the same to the Oilers, beating them 34-5 on their way to a Super Bowl victory. Despite losing in such a decisive fashion, the Oilers had lots to be optimistic about, as Earl Campbell was one of the best young talents in the NFL, and coach Bum Phillips was considered one of the better head coaches in the league. The team returned home to the Astrodome, which was packed with adoring fans, there to congratulate their beloved Oilers on what was their best season since the championship-winning seasons of 1960 and 1961. The 1979-80 season would be yet another stellar year for the Oilers, as they finished 11-5, with Campbell rushing for 1,600 yards in the regular season, and the team earned yet another wildcard spot, this time against the Denver Broncos. They beat the Broncos 13-7 and faced the San Diego Chargers in the divisional round. The Oilers were playing without quarterback Dan Pastorini and without Earl Campbell, but still managed to win against the Chargers 17-14, thanks in large part to their defense showing up big, in particular rookie safety Vernon Perry, who set a playoff record with 4 interceptions. Chargers quarterback Dan Fouts was intercepted 5 times total. This set up a rematch in the AFC Championship between the Oilers and the Steelers. The Oilers quickly went up 7-0 after Vernon Perry picked off Terry Bradshaw and took it 75 yards to the crib. However, despite the Oilers' best efforts, the Steelers would ultimately win 27-13, sending the Oilers home losers in the AFC Championship for the second straight season. The Steelers would go on to defeat the Rams in Super Bowl 14, repeating as champions. Before the 1980-81 season, quarterback Dan Pastorini was traded to the Oakland Raiders in exchange for future Hall of Fame quarterback Ken Stabler. Stabler was 34 years old at the time of the trade, and obviously not the same as he had been during his prime years in Oakland. Even still, the 1980-81 season was good for the Oilers as they went 11-5 and earned a wildcard berth for their third straight season. Phillips was fired on New Year's Eve of 1980 by owner Bud Adams for failing to report a player who had used recreational drugs during the season. Phillips did notify Adams, but not until the conclusion of the regular season, prompting an irate Adams to give Phillips the boot. Ed Biles took over the head coaching duties. Biles had spent the past 6 seasons as defensive coordinator of the Oilers. The Oilers would be unceremoniously bounced from the playoff bracket at the hands of the Oakland Raiders and former Oiler Dan Pastorini, who was actually just a backup on the team. The Oilers lost 27-7, and following the 1980-81 season, the team began a long playoff drought. The majority of the 80s were unkind to Houston, and in 1984 the team traded Earl Campbell to the New Orleans Saints, where he would reunite with coach Bum Phillips. The same year, they would land future 9-time Pro Bowler Warren Moon, who was convinced to sign with them after having spent 5 seasons with the Edmonton Eskimos of the Canadian Football League, where he won 5 Grey Cups in a row and was twice named Grey Cup MVP and named the CFL's most outstanding player the year prior in 1983. The Oilers would not return to the playoffs until 1987 when they finished 9-6 in a strike-shortened season. For years at this point, owner Bud Adams had been trying to get the Oilers a new stadium as he felt rent at the Astrodome was too high. The Astrodome's owners, the parent company of the MLB's Houston Astros, would not budge on lowering the rent to Adams' satisfaction, which caused Bud Adams to attempt to get the taxpayers of Houston to fund a new stadium. And when it looked like he wasn't going to get his way, he threatened to move the team to Jacksonville, Florida, which drew the ire of many city officials, sparking a years-long feud. Meanwhile, on the field, the Oilers beat the Seattle Seahawks in overtime in the AFC wildcard round in 1987, and then fell to the Broncos in the divisional round. The Oilers went 10-6 the following year in 1988 and squeaked by the Cleveland Browns in the wildcard by a score of 24-23 in a snowstorm in Cleveland. The Oilers would once again lose in the divisional round, this time to the Buffalo Bills. In the background, Bud Adams was looking at other cities to move the Oilers to, creating more tension between the city and the team. Baltimore had approved funding on a new stadium despite losing the Colts to Indianapolis in 1984 and not having an NFL franchise at that time. However, the Houston-based Adams didn't want to have to fly that far just to watch his team play. That's when he found out about Nashville, a city with a population of 500,000 at the time and a television market that was decently big. Nashville had been trying to lure a professional sports franchise for a while at that point, trying and failing once already when they tried to coax the NHL's New Jersey Devils to relocate. The Astrodome didn't lower rent for the Oilers, however what they did do was approve funding to add 7,500 new seats, and adding 65 luxury boxes to the facility and adding brand new AstroTurf, which cost a total of $67 million. The funding came from increased property taxes and doubling the city's hotel tax. However, Adams kept demanding more and more, which irritated city officials and created even more conflict. The Oilers won the AFC Central in 1991, their first division title in 25 seasons, with an 11-5 record. They defeated the New York Jets 17-10 in the wildcard round and faced the Broncos in the divisional round. They were leading 24-23 with 2 minutes remaining in the game, hoping to return to the AFC Championship for the first time since the 79-80 season. However, John Elway had other plans, leading the Broncos on an 80-yard drive to set up the game-winning field goal by Broncos kicker David Treadwell, and the Oilers lost 26-24. In 1992, the Oilers went 10-6, and in the wild card round against Buffalo had the worst playoff collapse in the history of the NFL. They led the Bills 35-3, but wound up losing in overtime 41-38, which as of this video's release date is the largest blown lead in NFL history. The game is infamous, being referred to as the comeback. In the 1993-94 season, the Oilers went 12-4, their best record up to that point, and won another AFC Central title. They clinched a first-round bye, however, they were upset in the divisional round by the Joe Montana-led Kansas City Chiefs by a score of 28-20. Following the 1993-94 season, longtime quarterback Warren Moon was traded to the Minnesota Vikings. Without Moon there the following season, the Oilers went 2-14, which represented their third-worst record in franchise history. The Oilers had the third overall pick in the 1995 NFL Draft as a result, drafting future NFL MVP Steve McNair, a quarterback out of Alcorn State. During the mid-90s, Adams was again trying to lobby the city for a new stadium as he felt the Astrodome was outdated compared to other NFL stadiums. Adams promised to pay 25% of the cost of a new stadium, and to further try and convince the city to get on board with the idea, told them that it would be a dual-purpose venue that could also house the NBA's Houston Rockets as well. Houston Mayor Bob Lanier initially supported Adams' idea privately, but he knew that publicly he could not do so, given the fact that most city officials and a lot of the residents disliked Adams. The residents of Houston wanted the Oilers to stay, however, a lot voiced concerns over the prospect of funding a new stadium with tax dollars, especially because the addition to the Astrodome had been done fairly recently. The economy of the city, and more broadly the state of Texas, was still recovering from the oil collapse of the 1980s, and so taxpayers were not very willing to budge on this issue. Sensing that he wouldn't get his brand new stadium that he wanted, Adams began secretly meeting with the mayor of Nashville, Phil Bredesen, and Bredesen wasn't a football fan. In fact, he knew very little about it, but he knew that his city would benefit greatly from having the Oilers there. He convinced Adams to sign an exclusive negotiating agreement. If Nashville gave Adams the stadium he wanted, then the Oilers would relocate. By this point, Houston's political and business leaders were leading a campaign against Adams, and Mayor Lanier of Houston, needing support in order to get reelected, joined the campaign against Adams. Local media became involved, running what was essentially hit pieces on Adams. Among those to criticize him sharply were the Houston Chronicle and Houston Post. Basically, the message from the entire city of Houston to Adams amounted to, "We ain't paying, so quit asking."
I'm not going to, so quit asking.
Meanwhile, in Nashville, Bredesen was working hard to convince Davidson County voters to approve $80 million in bonds to fund part of the cost of the $292 million that was needed to build the stadium, as well as a practice facility and the relocation fees that the NFL would impose. Dave Cooley, who was the leader of the Yes for Nashville campaign to help get voters on their side, said this, quote, "People who never voted for anything came out to vote for this," unquote. However, the most important vote was that of the NFL owners on the issue of whether or not to allow the move to happen. Out of the 30 total owners, it was 23-6 in favor of allowing the move, with one owner, Mr. Al Davis, who owned the Raiders, choosing to remain neutral on the topic and not vote. Voting against the move were the following 6 teams: Buffalo, Cincinnati, Minnesota, the New York Giants, Pittsburgh, and Washington. For the 1995-96 season, the Oilers went 7-9, and in November of 1995, Bud Adams officially announced plans to relocate the team to Nashville, beginning with the 1998-99 season. After the move was announced, support for the Oilers diminished significantly, and the following season, in 1996-97, the Oilers only had 3 games with a crowd of more than 30,000 people. But there were some reasons for the few remaining fans to cheer, though. The team improved to 8-8, and rookie running back Eddie George won Offensive Rookie of the Year after rushing for 1,368 yards. The team's radio network, KTRH, which at one time stretched across all of Texas, reduced their flagship to the Houston area and a few affiliates in Tennessee. By October of 1996, the station was cutting off Oilers games to broadcast preseason Houston Rockets games. The city was upset with Adams, and they were letting him and the Oilers know it. Adams, upset with the city of Houston for what he perceived to be unfair treatment, wanted out sooner than 1998, and so a deal was reached in May of 1997 to allow them to break their lease with the Astrodome a year early and relocate immediately, meaning that the 1996-97 season was their last in Houston, and no one knew it until several months after the season had already ended. The Oilers' last game at the Astrodome was a 21-13 loss to the Cincinnati Bengals, but their last game ever as the Houston Oilers was actually a victory over the Baltimore Ravens on the road, beating the Ravens, who were playing in their first season in Baltimore, by a score of 24-21. The Tennessee Oilers would play the 1997-98 season at Liberty Bowl Stadium in Memphis and the 1998-99 season at Vanderbilt Stadium in Nashville before their brand new home Nissan Stadium opened in 1999. For the 1999 season, they rebranded as the Tennessee Titans and made their first Super Bowl in franchise history against the St. Louis Rams, losing in heartbreaking fashion.
In regulation. It is caught by Dyson. Can he get in? No, he cannot. Mike Jones made the tackle. And the Rams have won the Super Bowl.
Overall, the story of the Houston Oilers is one of a city and an owner feuding, and how that destroyed a team that had existed for 3.5 decades. So much history was lost, so much culture down the drain. And obviously it didn't completely destroy the team because, they exist today as the Titans, but the city of Houston does miss the Oilers, even though they now have the Texans. But thanks to powerful egos from powerful men and stubbornness on both sides, the Houston Oilers are a dead team. If you enjoyed this video, leave a like. If you hated it, leave a dislike. But either way, comment for the algorithm. Peace out.